We're TTB, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau.
Thank you for joining the TTB Bootcamp webinar series for Brewers, Part 2, Brewers Notices. I am Kelly Downs, and the Technical Advisor in our Application Services Division. Before we jump in, I'll pause for a moment to let you read our disclaimer. This basically tells you that we're not here to establish any new guidance or set forth any new policy. If I happen to say something incorrectly that is contrary to the laws and regulations administered by TTB, it is the laws and regulations that supersede anything I tell you today. In addition, if this presentation is on our website for a while and you would like to watch it again, there is a chance that any of the information that I'm sharing could be superseded and become outdated. So always consult the most recent regulations. In this session, we will cover an overview of TTB's Brewers Notices, amendments, alterations, and contract brewing. Operations as a brewer may be conducted only by a person who is given notice as a brewer. TTB Form 5130.10 is the form for the brewer's notice. However, the form can be filed online through Permits Online for faster processing. Before applying for a brewer's notice, you will need your organizational documents establishing the business entity, a lease agreement or proof of ownership, as well as signing authority authorization. You must supply proof that any person who will sign documents, forms, reports, etc., or who will correspond with TTB about this business has legal authority to do so. If persons with signing authority are not identified in the organizational documents, then TTB Form 5100.1 may be used. If someone other than an employee, such as a consultant, will act on behalf of the business entity, TTB Form 5000.8, the power of attorney would be required, as well as an additional diagram of the brewery. And additional information can be found at our website. Information that is required for a brewer's notice includes name and principal address, the statement of the type of business organization, such as sole proprietorship, corporation, LLC, other business types, a description of the brewery as specified in Regulation 25.68, a list of any trade names that would be used, a 24-hour cycle of operations at the brewery, and statements showing ownership or controlling interest in other breweries if the brewery intends to transfer beer without payment of tax between breweries of the same ownership as authorized in 27 CFR 25.181, as well as a statement of whether the brewer is required to furnish a bond under 25.91. For a complete list of required information, please see 27 CFR 25.62 through 25.68. Applications can be submitted using Permits Online. If you are a new user, you will need to register for a new account. Your information in Permits Online is organized into two different kinds of records. The entity records, which would be for a single company or business entity represented by a unique employer identification number. And then the commodity operations record is created for each TTB regulated operation or permit, registration, or notice the entity is approved for. A typical entity record will have at least one, but may have additional commodity operations. For example, the entity record contains business information and a separate record for the brewery information. It is also possible to have multiple commodity records under one entity record, as seen here, where they have a brewery, a winery, even an importer permit. When applying to start a new TTB regulated business, you'll complete both a new entity application and a new commodity operations application for each permit, registration, or notice that you would need. If you would need to file an amendment related to the business entity, you will file one application including any changes that would be associated with each TTB permit, or registration, or notice held by that company. Changes to your entity that must be reported to TTB include any changes to the legal business name, controlling ownership, if you would have any changes to any partner or general partner, as well as any changes to stockholder or members holding ownership of 10% or more, as well as corporate officers, directors, or any titled positions. If you will be adding, revoking, or changing signing authority or power of attorney, as well as if you will be terminating all of the TTB regulated operations under your EIN. Now, a change in proprietorship involves changes in the entity that owns and operates the brewery. That could include ownership change or a change in entity type, such as a sole proprietor to an LLC or a partnership to a corporation. In either event, the entity that owned the business no longer operates or owns the operation at that location. Now, a change in control involves changes in stock ownership, LLC membership ownership, and certain changes to the entity's officers or directors. This would require an amended brewer's notice to be filed within 30 days of the change. Additionally, personnel questionnaires may need to be required for any new owners or officers. And for additional information, please see 27 CFR 25.71 through 25.75. Changes to the commodity operations that must be recorded would be including changes to the premises, a change in location, a change in the bond, change in construction or use of building, operations, doing business as name or operating what name, as well as a change in the mailing address. If you'll be adding or removing trade names, a non-contiguous premises, either alternation of premises or proprietor, or any variance or alternate method. If you'll be terminating operations at one location, but keeping other operations or locations under the same EIN, you would file the termination at the commodity level. Next, we will discuss alternations and contract brewing. An alternation of premises is when the same owner and same EIN conduct another TTB regulated business, such as a winery or a distilled spirits plant. If you're already an established brewery and wish to add a winery or distilled spirits plant, you must submit a new application for the commodity operation that you're adding. Include an updated diagram showing which areas will be alternating, and then variances to request to use the brewery for another purpose, as well as the requirement to notify TTB of each alternation. In addition, if you have a bond, then a change in bond or consent of surety would need to be filed. An alternation of proprietorship would be when two or more proprietors with different EINs are operating at the same premises and sharing space and/or equipment. Generally, the proprietor of an existing brewery would be the host, and they would agree to rent space and equipment to a new tenant brewer. Alternating brewery proprietorships allow existing breweries to use excess capacity and give new entrants to the beer business an opportunity to begin on a small scale without investing in the premises and equipment. Both the host brewer and the tenant brewer are required to submit applications and supporting documents to TTB prior to the alternation. Examples of submissions required by host and or tenant would be including a brewer's notice or amended brewer's notices, description of the portion of the brewery premises and equipment to be periodically alternated with the tenant brewers to whom it will alternate, request for alternate methods of operation, a copy of the agreement between the host and the tenant, as well as a business plan showing development plans for brewing business. In addition, see Industry Circular 2005-2 for a complete list. The contract brewing is a business relationship in which one person, such as a wholesaler or even a retail dealer or even a brewer, pays a brewing company, which would be considered the contract brewer, to produce beer for them. The TTB considers this brewing arrangement to be an ordinary commercial arrangement. In contract brewing, the contract brewer retains title to the beer at least until the beer is tax paid or removed from the brewery. Contract brewing is entirely responsible for producing the beer, keeping all the records, labeling the beer with its name and address, obtaining necessary certificate of label approvals, as well as paying the taxes at the appropriate rate when removed from the brewery. Now, what is the difference between an alternating proprietorship versus contract brewing? For qualification and permits, in a contract brewing arrangement, only the contract brewer must qualify as a brewer under Part 25. And then the person on whose behalf the beer is brewed may need to be a wholesaler, a retailer, or another brewer, or another private party. In an alternating proprietorship, both the host and the tenant brewer would act as brewers and each must qualify for under Part 25. Now, the tenant brewer would not need to be qualified as a wholesaler, since the beer that the tenant produces would be considered his or her own production if it is not sold to the tenant by the host brewer. For the records and reports in a contract brewing arrangement, the contract brewer is responsible for keeping all records of the beer production, removal, and for providing the operation reports to TTB. In alternating proprietorship, the host and the tenant brewer must keep separate records of their own respective beer production and removals, and would each need to provide operational reports to TTB. Tax payment for an alternating proprietorship and contract brewing. In a contract brewing arrangement, the contract brewer is responsible for paying tax at the appropriate rate of tax on beer removed from the brewery. Now, the person for whom the beer is produced would have no responsibility to pay the tax, but may compensate the contract brewer for tax or any other expenses pursuant to that contract arrangement. In an alternating proprietorship, the host and the tenant brewer individually pay tax at the rate of tax applicable to each upon the removal of their own beer from the brewery. And then lastly, if you do go out of business and will be discontinuing all brewery operations, you would need to file a termination of operations amendment to the brewer's notice, as well as file a final operations report showing all beer on hand as tax paid or transferred to the new owner before termination. When you submit that operations report, make sure you mark it final and that there is zero on hand at the end of the period. As well as you would need to file a final excise tax return. Again, that should be marked as a final return, and the period should cover up to the last day of business as a brewery and should include all removals. And we have compiled a list of beer resources for your convenience with links. If you have any questions, please reach out and contact our National Revenue Center. They can be reached via telephone, or you can submit an inquiry using the National Revenue Center contact form. Thank you for joining our webinar today. On your screen, you will find a link, or you can use the QR code for a survey. Please take a few minutes to provide feedback.
Visit TTB's official YouTube channel at USTTB.gov for more TTB-related content. And remember to click subscribe so you'll always know when we upload new videos.